Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to another session whereby we look at some of the Shubuhat, some of the misconceptions about Islam, and we respond in kind. Today we're going to be looking more generally about the Hudud, the punitive laws or the penal code in Islam, and we've already dealt with Riddah, which is in the previous episode, and this is going to be something which is participant led, so people here have prepared something. And we have people of knowledge here as well to correct us if we are wrong, because this is going to be a fiqh intensive class which requires specialism in that area, meaning in the area of Islamic jurisprudence. So let's start with the first of the hudud which we're going to be dealing with today. Let's start with something maybe low-laying in the sense, which is zina. Now zina, yes, there's two kinds of had applied here for two kinds of people. Tell us what zina is, Furqan, and tell us what you've prepared and what kind of information you have on that.
Assalamu alaikum. Zina so zina is one of the forbidden sins, one of the major forbidden sins in Islam.
Yeah.
After shirk and murder.
Say that again?
A murder, killing someone.
Yeah.
All religions agree that zina is haram. No religion allows it. The punishment for zina is one of the most severe punishments, because it violates the honor of and lineage of the person, people. In Arabic, the meaning of zina is immorality, and it has a general meaning and a specific meaning. The general meaning includes that which is punishable and that carries a punishment, and that which doesn't carry a punishment. Ibn Abbas, may Allah be pleased with him, said, "I have never heard any better definition of small fault than that which Abu Huraira, may Allah be pleased with him, narrated from the Prophet, peace be upon him, Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Allah has decreed for every son of Adam his share of zina, and there is no way to escape from it. The zina of the eyes is a glance, the zina of the tongue is the speaking, and the zina of the mind is wishing and hoping. Then the private part either acts upon this or it doesn't." So basically zina is not always associated with private parts itself.
Alright, so let's stop there for a second. This is a very powerful hadith, a very important one. The hadith of that there's a share of zina attributed to everyone that's the son of Adam, and that so zina in the sense that you can look at something and you can not lower your gaze. That's a kind of zina. But is that kind of zina, is that punishable? Like if someone looks at someone, are you going to get punished for that?
You could be punished in
hereafter.
Yeah.
Yeah, but is
no.
there a punitive law for it?
No.
So this is a good hadith because it's very powerful. But the zina that we're looking for is what kind of zina? What do we mean by zina?
We mean zina more in the terms of
the religious understanding. Yeah. So the what the fuqaha understand by the word zina, or meaning what the jurists understand. What does it entail?
They talk more about in sexual intercourse.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
So how do you define that?
So it would be that which includes penetration.
And how do you define that? Sorry to be specific, but they have very specific. They have very specific.
So basically, there needs to be penetration. In the sense of like, part of the penis needs to go inside the private parts of the female.
I mean,
that would be.
And Mashaykh, correct me if I'm wrong, but literally what they say is like idkhal hashafat al-dhakar, which is like the tip of the. So, like the tip of the penis, the head of the penis, it goes into either the vagina or the anus. Both of those two things, any of those two things, both of those things will be considered zina. So there's a had for that. There's a punitive law. That's where the punitive laws are. Let me be sorry to be very this might be sorry to be whatever. But if somebody if somebody put his penis in someone's mouth, is there a had attached to that necessarily?
No.
Okay. There might be something else called ta'zirat, or that, but there's no had, right? There's no actual, and we'll talk about what the had is. There's no actual punishment, punitive sense. What about, and sorry once again for the explicit nature, but we're living in the LGBTQ era, and this needs to be delineated. What about if a woman puts her vagina on another woman's vagina?
There's no had for that.
Yeah, once again, this goes into the realm of ta'zirat, something which the authorities will have to look at. Because, so this is very important. Zina is defined very, very strictly, actually. What about if a man and a woman touch each other in anything except for the penetration? Like they molest each other, put it that way, or feel each other up, or I don't know the language of the foreplay, or it's haram, it's zina, but it's not punishable. It's not the one that we're talking about where there's a had.
Yeah.
Continue, please.
So we have ayahs in the Quran where God forbids zina and anything that leads to zina, such as Al-Furqan 25, 68, 70. Where shall I read that?
Yeah, you can.
Where and those who invoke not any other God along with Allah, nor kill such life as Allah has forbidden, except for just cause, nor commit illegal sexual intercourse, and whoever does this shall receive the punishment. The torment will be doubled to him, and on the day of the resurrection, and he will abide therein in disgrace, except those who repent and believe, and believe and do righteous deeds. For those Allah will change their sins into good deeds, and Allah is oft forgiving and most merciful. Okay. We also have Surah Al-Isra 17:32, and come not near to unlawful sexual intercourse, barely it is a fahisha, and an evil way, basically. Yeah. So Imam Al-Qurtubi said, the scholars said that the phrase "and come not even close, come not near to unlawful sexual intercourse" is more eloquent than merely just saying do not commit zina, because the meaning is do not even come close to zina, basically.
Yeah. But now my question to you is, what is the punishment for zina, and what categories do we have for it? So let's put ourselves in a situation classically now. We're not saying this is implementable, just to be very clear, in the UK or Europe or something like that. We're not saying that you can do this in your homes, or that's how, we are saying classically in an Islamic state, what would have been the punishment for something like zina? What kind of categories do we have?
So the degree, so the sin of zina, the degree may vary, basically, and the gravity of the offense depends also on the nature of the circumstances of the deed. Although all zina is haram, major sin and an act of immorality would be, for instance, having sexual intercourse with someone that is your family member, such as
Okay, that's a good way of. That's a good way to start, actually, because we forget that sometimes. For example, you're saying that having intercourse with your mum, sorry to say, or your sister or something like that, that the punishment for that, some jurists have said is a higher punishment even than the punishment that is prescribed for the rest of
So obviously, if the person, after that we have if the person is your neighbor, or the person is the husband is on jihad, or the husband is away, so depending on how many things you affect, the punishment is worse. So
Okay, well let's start with, you're right. I mean, this is a very good, powerful points that maybe people would have forgotten. What's the punishment for someone who's never been married before, man or woman, committing a sexual act, and that has been witnessed by 4 male just witnesses that have all seen the pen going into the ink? What's the meaning, the penis going into the vagina? What is the punishment for that?
So for those that commit zina before marriage, meaning they're not married, or none of them, so neither the boy or the girl are married, it's 100 lashes.
Yes.
If obviously they need 4 witnesses that can prove and that can testify that.
And what if there's only 3 witnesses?
By the way, 4 male witnesses,
What if there's 3?
it's not enough.
Well, what if there's 2?
No, it's not enough. It needs to be 4, and this we can't use DNA or video or anything. It needs to be a person. It needs to be 4 persons to be able to.
Okay. What if the person confesses?
If the person confesses, yeah, that's valid.
Okay. What if one of them confesses and the other one denies?
That's a good question.
Okay. We'll pause the video in a second. These questions are going to come to the Sheikh. Don't worry. I'm going to make sure of it myself. But the point is that we need to differentiate between 2 things. Yeah, the one who's been married before and the one who's not been married before, because the majority of jurists, they define the muhsan as the person who's been married before. So, for example, say you've got married and then you got divorced. Yeah. The punishment for you will forever be different now to the one who's never been married before.
Yeah, that's something I have a question about as well.
No problem, but do you get the concept first?
Yeah.
So repeat to me what I've just said.
So basically, if you're never married before, your punishment will be 100 lashes. But once you get married, even if you get divorced,
Yes.
your punishment is not the same.
What is it?
It's stoning to death.
Yeah, so it's a capital punishment.
Yes, capital.
Oh, that's the classical law.
Yeah.
Okay, and is it only for men or for women as well?
For both.
For both. So it's not it's not a female discrimination law.
No.
So it's for both males and females.
It's the exact same for both.
And what's the evidentiary bar here? What needs to be seen?
Proof. You need to have proof that.
And what's the proof?
4 witnesses.
What about if there's 3?
No, this is
Right.
not permissible.
Good. Okay, we're going to pause the camera now, and we're going to ask some questions, and we're going to open it up for a group discussion, and we're going to come back and tell you the end user there what we've said. But so far, so good. All right. So the group had a long discussion, and we covered many topics, and I'll tell you a few of them which I think are most pertinent to this particular recording. We discussed the different types of things that are mentioned classically in the books of fiqh. And then we had a discussion about the evidentiary bar, and clearly in the Islamic tradition, the evidentiary bar for the legal system when it comes to zina is quite high. And some scholars of Islam, like Ibn Qudam and others, they said that in fact, the evidentiary bar for zina, which is the 4 witnesses all having to witness the pen going into the ink, the proverbial pen going into the proverbial ink, that it was so high that it had never been implemented ever at the time of Islam. In fact, Umar ibn al-Khattab, there was a famous incident with him, and there were 4 witnesses. One of the witnesses, Abu Bakr, in fact done mukhalafa, or went against what the rest of the witnesses said, and the other witnesses had seen graphic details and so on, and yet despite that being the case, that the punishment was not carried out. And so for this punishment to be carried out, in fact, for this punishment to be carried out, for the most cases, if any time at all, it would usually be done through confession. Interestingly, Ibn al-Qayyim, we also discussed, and the people had some evidences here, said that it's permissible for someone who is asked to confess to not confess, and in fact to say that he didn't do or she didn't do the thing in question. And that is because the Sharia itself, it pushes people away from these kinds of punishments. And this brings us to the point that really these laws are meant first and foremost as a deterrent. But of course, if we're saying that, when the evidentiary bar is so high, one can ask the question that what about people that do things which could be of a sexual nature, could be exploitative, and there could be good evidence, circumstantial evidence for it, but which the evidence is not met, the four witnesses are not there, and so on. In which case we discuss at considerable length the matter of a ta'zirat in Islam. Now, ta'zirat are these punishments which are not clearly spelled out in the Quran and Sunnah in a format which says that this is how many lashes or this is what penalty that person gets. But in fact, these ta'zirat, according to people like Ibn Taymiyyah, can be up to death. In other words, they can incur up to the death penalty, up to the capital punishment, which indicates in and of itself that that there is scope for a Muslim leader seeing certain circumstantial evidence, seeing certain trends and behaviors of a sexual kind, which are having a corrosive effect on the Muslim people, to impose laws, potentially, depending on what opinion one follows in Islam, that puts them in prison, or that imposes certain lashes on them, up to death, in fact, is what the Ibn Taymiyyah position would be. And so really, even this aspect of the evidentiary bar being too high, so that certain crimes and certain people doing certain crimes can be kind of swept under the radar, or under the carpet, or go under the radar, even that has its solutions within the Islamic paradigm. Now, we're going to move on to the next thing. We've talked about zina, we've talked about the had therein, or for those who commit zina. The next thing, what was the next thing that we had planned? Will it be theft? Yes, let's do theft. Let's do the, for the sariq. Let's go through that, please.
Yeah, firstly, based on the Quran, it states in Surah Al-Ma'idah, verse 38, it says, "As for the thief, male or female, cut off the hands of both. This is the recompense for what they have done, and an exemplary punishment from Allah. Allah is Almighty, All-Wise."
Yes.
So that's from the Quran. In the Hadith, we got various examples of theft and the punishment for that. And it's if we go to, say, Bukhari, Volume 8, Book 81, Hadith number 780, Aisha radiallahu anhu said, the Prophet, peace be upon him, said that the hand should be cut off for stealing something that is worth quarter of a dinar or more. And we have that's narrated various times. There's also in the same volume 8, Book 81, Hadith number 785, that the hand of the thief was not cut off during the lifetime of the Prophet, except for something equal to the value of a shield.
Okay.
Yeah. And
well, that's good, yeah.
There's a further hadith. It says, it's hadith again, volume 8, book 81, number 787, narrated by Ibn Umar, that it says Allah's apostle cut off the hand of a thief for stealing a dinar that was worth 3 dirhams. So we've got the value of the thing that needs to be clarified. Yeah.
Excellent. So what we're going to do now, inshallah, we're going to switch off the camera, and we're going to have a question and answer session with the Sheikh on this, with the Mashaykh on this matter, and then we'll come back in likewise manner and feedback to the people at home. Right. So we had a very interesting conversation about sariqah, or the idea of theft in Islam, what it means. As we know, there's an ayah in the Quran. This is not just a matter of hadith. وَالسَّارِقُ وَالسَّارِقَةُ فَقْطَعُوا أَيْدِيَهُمَا جَزَاءً بِمَا كَسَبَ نَكَالًا مِنَ اللَّهِ in Surah Al-Ma'idah. Well, Allah says that, for the sariq, the male and female thief, that their hand is to be cut off, and that this is a recompense for what they have earned, and that this is something which is an akal or some kind of exemplary, something which the people may see as a kind of like from Allah. And we discussed what exactly the Islamic Sharia means by sariqah and what it doesn't mean by sariqah. And one of the things that came about is the need for a hirz, what's referred to as a hirz, or the idea of a safe or a location where this thing, wherever it is that is stolen, is been. So in other words, it's been placed in a location which is meant for safety purposes. Yani, if for example, and this may include, but it's not limited to, if I have some money in the house, for example, and it's in it's in a box somewhere, it's clear that it's meant to be stored in a certain location. But it could also mean something like a car, for example, that's outside of the house, but culturally that's known that people don't go into cars that they don't own. So this also it can extend to that. And there are other things which are linguistically understood maybe as theft, but are not particularly seen by the Sharia as theft. For example, if someone has taken an apple from the supermarket. Now, there's two things here. There is actually a nisab, if you like, a threshold that one must actually meet in order for that, for it to be referred to as sariqah. And that threshold is rubu' dinar, which is 1/4 of a dinar, which is equivalent to about 4 grams of gold, which if you change it into modern day currency is about 189 to 190 sterling pounds. Now, that's quite a significant amount. It's not, for example, as in the Orientalists, we were talking about some of the Orientalist depictions in Aladdin and so on, where some people, the characters taking an apple from the, and then they get their hand cut off immediately. This wouldn't be actually what happens, and this is clearly, a distortion and a caricature of the Islamic paradigm. Likewise, if someone is in a state of necessity, for example, they have extreme hunger, or that they are majnoon, or we even talked about kleptomaniacs, people that do it maybe because they have a pre-existing health condition. Now, these individuals would be, for all intents and purposes, exempt. They have an excuse from this law. And so, obviously, they would have to be looked at from a case-by-case basis, but this would be what happens. We also discussed the famous hadith of Al-Makhzumiyya, an individual who was quite prestigious in her own community from a tribe, Makhzumi tribe, and who had controversially, according to some fuqaha, taken some of the assets or goods or products or things of some of the people and stored it in her own homes, and then denied that she had ever been given it in the first place. And this was an implausible kind of deniability which the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ did not accept, even though she had people who were intercessors on her behalf, doing shafa' on her behalf. And in fact, the Prophet was angered by the suggestion and had said very famously in one of the most famous hadiths in this regard, that had even my daughter Fatima bint Muhammad stolen, that I would cut her hand off as well. And so here we have many different things that we've spoken about, but the main thing to note is that this is something which is clearly in the religion of Islam, something which is unnuanced actually in the discussion. This is something which requires 2 witnesses, like many of the hudud do. Obviously it's a lower evidentiary bar because the punishment is lower than, for example, that which is implemented in some cases, for example, in zina. However, this is something in the religion of Islam. And some may argue that actually this is a barbaric type of punishment. We talked about the alternatives, and in fact the long time in prison, which some people would prefer maybe as a punishment in the Western systems, how much that would cost the taxpayer. I mean, I'm saying this from myself now. I think it's been kind of estimated that 30 to 40,000 pounds is how much is spent on one inmate.
It varies as well depending on
What kind of prison it is?
Like a higher
You know more. You know about this one, right?
Not personally, but yeah. So like higher security prisons would cost more.
That's unbelievable. So imagine someone spends 5 years in prison, and let's just say £40,000. So the taxpayer is 40, 4, 8, 12, 16. That's £200,000 that the taxpayer has to spend for one inmate for a crime that he committed.
And it's also begs the question of whether or not it's even more merciful. Like, for example, if you're gonna, like in a particular punishment within Islam, if someone is getting the death penalty, is that necessarily more quote-unquote barbaric than throwing someone into a small room for an entire lifetime with lots of other criminals? And we know about what kind of things happen in prisons. They're not savoury places. It's not somewhere people want to spend.
And in fact, you know, one of the people of knowledge that we have today spoke about the issue of compassion in its wrongful place.
Yeah.
And the very famous verse in the Quran that وَلَا تَأْخُذْكُمْ بِهِمَا رَأْفَةٌ فِي دِينِ اللَّهِ, you know, that do not let any compassion deter you from implementing the religion of Allah. And this is in Surah An-Nur, in fact, in the case of zina. But you know, the Sheikh mentioned that if this situation means that sometimes compassion or your natural feelings, which you're not blamed for in the Sharia necessarily, or which the Sharia does not necessarily you know, reprimand you for or hold you to account for, but sometimes they can be an inhibiting factor to the implementation of justice. And so when people make this argument from compassion, which you'll find similar to the argument of empathy, which we've already discussed, I think, that Paul Bloom has written a book about called Against Empathy, which in fact he argues this empathy can be, if you're using it to ascertain morality, he says that it's innumerate and discriminatory and biased. But likewise, compassion can be something which is a feeling that you have, but which deters you from justice itself. Did you want to say?
Yeah, well, there's an argument here as well that you could say that the death penalty could be an argument from compassion, especially if you consider, for example, long-term prison sentences to be a form of more mental torture.
Right.
So if you're going to be put into like a small room and you've got to share it with other nasty characters and you've got to fear for your life, and you know, people get shanked and that in prison, like it's not.
And sexual abuse.
Yeah, sexual abuse. So you could, and even when you sort of cross in towards the realm of animal ethics, all of a sudden this notion of compassion is completely inversed. Like if you have like a dog, for example, that is guilty of
very good point
killing someone, what do? They don't put it into a small box for all of its life until it dies. And I can guarantee you they would consider that a form of torture to the animal. But then when it comes to the human being, all of a sudden putting them into a small place which is going to be filled with anxiety.
I think that's a very, very good point. I've never actually thought of it in those terms. But what we're going to be looking at now is maharaba, a very famous kind of had, if you like, that's implemented in this case, and a famous verse that's mentioned in the Quran. Would you like to tell us something about
so
that?
maharaba is mentioned in Surah Ma'idah verse 33.
Yes.
So I was researching it, and to be honest, I was trying to find an exact definition, but Ibn Kathir brings one in his tafsir. So محاربة هي مؤادة ومخالفة وهي صدق الكفر ولقطع الطريق وخافة السبيل وهذا إفساد في الأرض يطلق على أنواع من شر حتى قال كثير من السلف منهم سيد بن وسيب أن قبض الدراهم والدنانين من إفساد في الأرض. So he says it's going against and relying upon being upon kufr and cutting off the road. So that's one of them. So it brings a few of them as part of his definition. So maharaba can include cutting off the road. It can include causing fear upon the way, on the path, and can include causing corruption on the earth. And so this is his definition. And from what I found, so I was reading Tafsir of Qurtubi, and he said there's an opinion that it was about that this ayah was revealed about the ahd of the mushrikeen at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and that they broke the ahd of the Prophet ﷺ. So this is one of the reasons of the sabab al-nuzul for this ayah. So that was one opinion, but I said Jumhur ulama, most ulama say that it was revealed because there were two people that came to Medina and they done bay'ah with the Prophet ﷺ. and then they were considered as Ahl Medina, and then they broke the ahd. So they had the Prophet ﷺ, they came to him, and they were afflicted with a disease or with the illness. So they asked the Prophet ﷺ about it, and then he advised them. This is where talking about the urine of the camel and mixing with the milk. Then that's what the Prophet ﷺ advised me to do. So after that event, they went to the shepherd of the camels, and then they got the shifa that the Prophet ﷺ prescribed for them. But then after that, they actually killed him. Actually, they killed him, and then that was their form of breaking their bay'ah with the Prophet ﷺ. So once they done that, and the Prophet ﷺ was informed of this, he was like, this is considered as maharaba. So they broke the ahd with the Prophet ﷺ with one of their actions, and I imagine it falls underneath one of those things that Ibn Kathir mentioned. And so there was a heavy punishment for them for this. So it wasn't like a normal punishment. So like they were killed, but they were also like samar ayunihim, their eyes were like gouged out, and they were thrown in the desert, and they were like laid there. And there's different narrations about it. Like some Sahaba mentioned that they were asked for water and they were very thirsty, but they were not given water. They were laid there just to die. And there's other narrations as well, different narrations of what exactly happened to them. But basically it's like one of the most severe punishments in Islam, essentially. Muharaba, like to the point where the eyes were gouged out, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, as a specific definition, like there's different things. Obviously, ikhafat as-sabil, causing fear upon the path. I think rape will mention things like this, like inhirab, generally crimes that fall under this. So I don't think there's an exact like definition of like this is exactly what it is, because there's many other narrations as well on how it should be implemented. But to be honest, it was quite confusing. And it was just I think the Sheikh should.
Well, we're gonna pause it now for a group discussion, and after we have that discussion, we'll feed back to people at home. Thank you for that, Mahdi. That was a very good summary of what it is, what muharaba is, and what the main evidence is in Islam are. So the class had a very interesting discussion about al-muharaba, and obviously the main verse in the Quran is in chapter 5, verse number 33, as the brother Mahdi mentioned. إنما الجزاء الذين يحاربون الله ورسوله يقتلوا أو يصلبوا أو تقطع أيديهم وأرجلهم من خلاف أو ينفوا من الأرض. This verse, which says that the recompense of someone or those who oppose Allah and the Messenger is that they are to be killed or crucified, or that their hands and their legs are amputated from both sides, or that they are exiled from the land. And the discussion hinged on the fact that actually, what is it? Why is this, first of all, such a very harsh punishment? The reason why is this is muharaba comes from the Arabic word harb, literally meaning war. So these people have declared war. In the case of the hadith that the brother mentioned clearly, those individuals actively killed individuals. Those two Bedouins killed individuals. They had stolen camels, and so they had been given the harshest punishment in Islam. And the question is, why is there so many options given here in the ayah? Why are there so many different options given, and when are these options to be applied? And the answer is actually the majority of scholars say that each situation has its own kind of prescription. So in other words, if someone steals, then the tuqatta aydiyahum wa arjulahum, or their hands are cut off, this would apply. And in other cases, well, yunfaw al-ard would apply, or being exiled from the land would apply. So it's each of these things could be applied for like cases. Other scholars say, in fact, this is something which the hakim or the ruler has to his disposal. In other words, that if someone is warring the Muslims, then these are things which can be applied. Now, clearly these are classical laws. They don't have an impact, I have to once again caveat and make clear, on our day-to-day living here in the West. But it's important to understand the laws. And this is talking about war. This is talking about people that have started the fight. These individuals have, this is a response, this is defense, because clearly the ayah is talking about those who have themselves declared war on Allah and the Messenger, on the Muslim people. So I don't think there's much controversy to really be discussed here. Everyone is very happy talking about compassionate themes in times of peace, But when the war happens and it's on their front door, they'll be the first to cry for the most harsh implementation of punishment to be applied on the other side. And this is something we're seeing time and time again, even and especially, in fact, in the Western world. So we don't really need to put much forward an apologetic justification type of approach. This is our religion. I mean, we're very proud of it and very happy with it. And with that, I conclude. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.